McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 5, Episode 6. The Shadow Creature Inside. October 25th, 1921, continued. I was very skittish, diary. So much had happened to me in the last half hour that I didn't quite know how to keep my head on straight. Wrath was changed. He had been touched by his doppelganger and absorbed a bit of his missing self. It made me lonely in a way. I wished that I could absorb every bit of my missing self, pieces of me that I've left behind with a simple touch. And yet, something felt horribly ominous, as if something had gone wrong, but we just didn't know yet. He was more human and less puppet now. He also claimed that he wasn't a night enthusiast anymore, that the doppelganger had still had those missing soul pieces, and they were his again. Wrath felt better than he had in a very long time, but I was also worried that there had been more to Ariana's magic, that a kind of instant loyalty to the night enthusiasts had been woven into the change. If that was true, then I think it must still be affecting Wrath. He was mad. He was my friend. He had also been poisoned by Ariana's spell. I had no idea what was going to happen next. I felt idle and grumpy, just sitting there stressing, so I popped you out and wrote furiously for about half an hour. I got the most recent adventures up to date, then nibbled on the end of my pen while I stared around the ice cream shop. Wrath still wasn't back. How long did it take to warn other train car inhabitants that a cadaver was coming their way? I supposed he had to find them all individually. But what if he was telling them all that Maud Merkel wasn't actually dead, that they should come this way? While I sat there stressing, I also thought about what to do. I had ghosts in a haunted house that wanted their bodies back. I had friends with missing souls. I also had Whiskalets. The stupid, horrible Whiskalets. I wondered if they could be stopped, ended. Would destroying them somehow destroy every spell they'd ever cast? But how would you go about destroying supernatural plague mask birds? Wrath returned, and I gave a little jump. I confess I spent a good 4 seconds looking around, waiting for more night enthusiasts to pop into existence behind him. "What are you looking at, Maud?" Wrath said. "I'm right here." "Sorry," I said. "You warned the others?" "Against my better judgment, yes. Now, alas, only Dawn Mamungus will die by her own hand. And you didn't tell anyone I was alive," I said. I hope it sounded like a joke. "I told everyone you had reincarnated into a fish," Wrath said. "Wasn't I supposed to?" And, diary, that was all I'd got. What could I do? Go ask the night enthusiasts if Wrath had tattled? I would have to trust that all was well, but also keep an eye on him. Everything in me wanted to believe he was my friend. But, if you recall someone named Ariana, that had not always worked well for me. We decided to take a stroll along the riverbanks, listening to the chatter of foreign languages and the murmur of the wind in the trees. I fancied a cup of coffee. My body wanted to go to bed, but it was sunny and bright, and I just wanted life and adventure. I began to see a glimpse of the life I could have once this adventure was over. All I needed to be happy was simple comfort, purpose, friends. I had had my taste of community, and now all I wanted out of life was to sit back and enjoy being happy, like a plant that finally has enough sun. "What do you think we do next?" Wrath said, stopping to peer at a booth of paintings. "I'm lost," I said. I was still distracted by its features. He was starting to make me think more and more of Hester, the man he had been before he'd gone mad. I thought of Maura. They had been engaged. She knew about him. Did he deserve to know about her? Would it drive him frantic to know that she was still alive, but that she might never leave that tower? That he couldn't reach her? "Lost how?" Wrath said. We continued walking. on what to do, of course. Well, Maud, Rath said, it's really quite simple. Oh, is it? I said. Please, tell me. I can't wait to hear how simple everything is. Rath grinned. You've done it in reverse. Think for a minute. What on earth are you talking about? I said. You've done it in reverse. You changed sides for a day. What? I said. I stopped walking. Noble and I had become night enthusiasts for a day. We had had our souls removed temporarily. You don't mean... I don't think I know anyone who can do it, Rath said, because I was in a train car for 5 years and I'm not really up to date on the scene. But let's think about the possibilities, shall we? What if there is a magic unusual who can make an empathy potion? That's what they took out of us, isn't it? Empathy? Sort of, I said. Well, what if we can stick it back inside of someone by tricking them into having a drink? Drinkable empathy, I said. Exactly, Rath said. I snorted. Then I giggled. It was preposterous. That isn't going to work, I said. Why not? Rath said, obviously offended. Because I couldn't tell him about my suspicions that part of the magic had been undying loyalty to the night enthusiasts. That was why Rath's potion idea wouldn't work, because empathy or not, if you were still loyal to the night enthusiasts, you wouldn't be my friend. Still, the idea was starting to spin. Could we do it temporarily? Was such a thing possible? It would be a bit like keeping tabs on a violent dog. If we didn't give our friends the potion with regularity, they would dash off to tattle to the night enthusiasts. How would it really be worth it? To have a bit more help, a few more friends and brains on our side, but horribly dangerous enemies as soon as the potion wore off. I mean, think about it. If we somehow succeeded in returning Noble to himself, befriended him, worked with him, but then he Mr. Hyded again and ran away. He would know our plans, our strategies. That Rath was a spy and I was alive. I missed my friends, but how could something temporary possibly be worth it? Still, something was tickling in my mind. Something that said, that's almost it. You've almost got it. There's something there. You just have to figure out what it is. Rath and I decided that our next move would be to set up a hideout somewhere, a new base. It could be much smaller this time, of course, no haunted houses necessary. We settled on a murder object that we hid in the mud on the banks of a river, in a forest so dense and empty we'd never be spotted teleporting to and from. The murder object led to a small houseboat on a completely different river, about 100 years previous. The houseboat was small and snug. I had a berth bed on one end, and Rath had the other. The walls were painted blue with little golden flowers. The window trim was dark green. It was cozy and smelled of straw and summer afternoons. Rath said he had had the murder object, which was a small statue of a rabbit, in his pocket for some time. It was hard to imagine anything bad ever happening in this place. How cleaned up is this murder? I said to Rath, looking around the creaking boat with a bit of nerviness. Do you see any blood? Rath said. Well, yes, there's no more body, I said, but is this months after the murder? A few days? What if the deceased's relatives show up wanting the boat back? Then we will give them the boat, Rath said. Stop worrying. I'm going to make crepes. Rath made crepes. He made about 40 of them, and stuffed the 6 we were willing to eat then and there with apples and cheese. Rath, I said, I didn't know you cooked. That's what I did, Rath said. I was a chef. What did you think I did before the train car, Maud? Wander around with weird hats on, scowling at people? After I was full of crepe, twilight began to fall. Crickets made the riverbank lush with sound. I listened to the gurgle and the crickets, and I decided that the first thing I was going to do, if we ever got out of this, was rent a little riverboat and live all summer long on the water. Rath nestled down into his bed and rather quickly began to snore. I would be tired too if I was Rath. I wasn't ready to settle down to sleep yet, though. I opened the creaking little door and stepped out onto the riverbank. I paced for a while in the long grass, looking at the stars, but I knew they weren't my stars. They were the stars of long ago, and I simply had to see my own world. Anything else felt like hiding. I used the murder object to return to 1921, and then I wandered the streets. I knew my disguise was still all right. I had to decide what to do. I sensed a revelation. It was in my brain somewhere. It made the back of my neck itch. I had a funny solution to all of this, a way to restore everything. I just couldn't think of it. Is there a way to kill the Whiskelets? I muttered. What would happen if I teleported into their world and shot them? Could they be ended in the ordinary way? Was it all right to murder murderers? Monsters? By destroying them, could I somehow undo this spell? Ariana's partial death. Could I restore my friends to the life they were supposed to have? What was the point in having to live through being human if you weren't even human? Human without humanity. I paced the streets. Here it wasn't quite twilight, although goodness knew my body had been ready for bed about 10 hours ago. I couldn't sleep yet. Not yet. I could feel the craziest idea. If only I could... Suddenly, as I walked, I spotted someone that I knew. I knew it was just happenstance, but it made me feel fated, like with every turn of the page of my life. I was destined to see something impossible. It was Ariana. Of course we both lived in the same city, but it was strange to see her. I knew she wouldn't recognize disguised Maud from this far away, so I stepped to the side of a tree and watched her. She sat on the edge of the bridge, staring down into the water. My heart tightened, diary. I've come such a long way when it comes to how I feel about Ariana. I used to follow her around like a puppy, because she was the only friend I had. I had been friendless and isolated for so long I accepted anything. She seemed like the sun, moon, and stars, because all I really wanted was to not be alone. But it has taken time with people who are really kind, really my friends, to show me how crooked she really was. There was always something missing with her, like part of her soul was snuffed out, like there was a shadow creature inside of her, bent over, muttering, calculated and cruel, like her mind wasn't human, like her mind was made of metal and rust and hunger, and half her smiles were just a way to make me stay. She wanted me, too, and she needed my friendship, but I don't think she knows what friendship is. So, diary, if you have been tearing your metaphorical hair out over me and Ariana, I am now imagining you with hair. A little book with a wig mop on top. Yellow? Curly and red? I don't think you should have hair, diary. It's disquieting. So anyway, your metaphorical hair is being torn out in frustration over how I could possibly keep going back to someone who is so obviously not right. Like something in her mind is crooked. Animalistic. Gestures of love aren't love, they're the currency of manipulation. I watched her with an ache in my chest. So, diary, all this to say, I was very happy to watch Ariana and to know that I was never going back. I didn't yearn for her in the way I'd used to. I had believed that I needed her to be happy. I had believed that she was the only one. But that had been a dark, twisted little world, and I didn't want to rejoin her in it. It was so good to watch her, and to not feel an impulse to regain her. That magnetism was gone. I felt free. But I also felt sorry for her. What was wrong with her mind that she could do the things she'd done? Betray me when I was perfectly willing to be a true friend. Become the leader of a horrible group. Mar the souls without consent from hundreds of bodies. Make a deal with the Whiskelets. I could have just walked away from her and spat on the ground and thought, good riddance. But what a soul. What a broken, ugly little soul. I didn't want her to have to live like that. I did not want her to become a monster when she was dead, wear a plague mask, and speak in a rasping voice. I had seen glimpses of who she might have been, and I wanted somehow to pull up the weeds and thorns and gasoline in the garden of herself and just give her sun and clean air. Surely with time she would grow back. Surely she could become human again. Finally I turned away, diary, but I knew two things. I was no longer under Ariana's influence. I did not need her. I was not God and she was not Satan. We were not immortal rivals. Our destinies were not pitted. She was not inevitable. She was just a cruel person, whose lure I could walk away from. So, I was not in love. But I did not want to see her belong to hell for all of her life. It would be a horrible way to live. If only there was a way to change the colours on the inside of her chest. I thought about heading to the Whisklet world now, right now, just to stab one of them, just to see if it worked. Instead, I knew that I had teleported to 1921 to find my thought, my revelation. I sensed that it was waiting for me, here, and seeing Ariana on the bridge hadn't been good enough. I had to go to where my brain had always worked, where ideas had always been present. I had to go back to the secret basement. I promise it wasn't as bad of an idea as it sounded, diary. I promise. I didn't look like myself, and the last time I had been there, it had been abandoned. The night enthusiasts had cleared us out, stolen our stuff, and then left it. I felt fairly sure it would be all right. Really, I just didn't think it through. I had to go. I knew I was going to find what I was looking for if I did. It was worth a few risks. Deep down, I wondered if I was also looking for Noble, Octavia, Scotland. As if I believed they were still waiting there for me. Oh, diary, it was like they were dead, but not with the finality of death. Or at least, that's what I was trying to undo. The finality of this. I teleported to McGillicuddy and Murder's pawn shop. My heart hammered, and a string was plucked in my stomach. I felt ill. I loved this place. I just wanted to wander in it the way I had done before, take comfort in the strangeness, each object a promise that life could be better than mundane. No one was in the pawn shop. I could hear and feel the silence. I wondered if they kept it locked up to the public now that Mr. McGillicuddy was a night enthusiast with nothing to care about. Would he leave it, abandoned? All his rooms and all his doors. Would it become nothing? Gather dust? I crept to the nail in the wall, and from there made my way down to the secret basement. I stopped in the foyer, and my breath stilled. Everything felt so vacant, diary, like it was holding its breath. Sometimes when there is life and people and story in a house, I get the sense that the walls are warm, alive, almost breathing, in motion. I did not get that sense now. No sense of breath. It was like it was dead. Cobwebs clustered on the walls and the light seemed grayer than usual. But what I couldn't stop staring at was the red writing. Death to all mice. Who had left this message for me? Only I could see it. Who had selected me as the heroine of this story? Who had put the words into my life? If I had never summoned the Whiskelets, would Ariana ever have found them? Could any of this have ever happened? I crept into the dark secret basement. There was a sour old smell, and yet everything still fizzled with their presence, like it wasn't abandoned, just waiting. Too much of the good of the people who had lived here was still in the walls. I knew the night enthusiasts had stolen mostly everything valuable, but I also knew Mr. McGillicuddy kept some small things in his study. I wandered in there, and sure enough, about half the things had been left behind on the floor. The odd things, the silly things, the things that shouldn't really have any value. I poked through them for a moment until I found something wonderful. A small glass bottle, turquoise, clouded glass, with a narrow spout. It had a weathered tag tied to its neck. Ghost bottle, the thing said, for the trapping of ghosts. Well, that would do, wouldn't it? We hope you've enjoyed Season 5, Episode 6, The Shadow Creature Inside of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren, all rights reserved. Thank you for continuing all this way with Maud's adventures. New audio dramas are coming, and there is news on those, as well as fandom fun, if you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Meg Macaulay Inc. That's Inc. INK. Please consider becoming a monthly supporter on Patreon. Or, if you can't commit right now, say thank you with a one-time donation. I now have Venmo. At Minerva Sweeney Wren. All links are in the description of this episode. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue with Season 5, Episode 7, Ghost in a Bottle.